There's an interesting concept that I've tried to hammer into my brain, which is remember, it's the title of this video, but remember the bad times. And it sounds weird, especially out of context, but I think it's one of the most important things for anyone who has had a lot of ups and downs in life and ends up in the same position, especially after they go through a rough period and they tell themselves, I'm never going to be in this situation again. I'm going to make sure that when things are good, that I don't, I, that I set my life up so that I don't have to deal with this again. And then lo and behold, not long after that, or maybe however long after that, they find themselves in a similar situation, similar bad situation. So things go bad. They're kind of down here. They get frustrated and angry, and they feel regretful of how they use their time or money or whatever. And they say that, okay, when things get better, I'm going to make sure that I never end up here again. And then as things get better, they kind of go up on the upswing, and life gets better and they feel good. And then when things start to go back down again, they realize that they didn't actually do any of the things that they said they were going to do to make their life better or to improve or to lessen the effect of the bad things or whatever it is. And so, with that in mind, one thing that I've been telling myself, and one thing that I think could help a lot of people, is to remember the bad times and remember them when things are good, not in a depressive way or not in a way where you feel worse or anything like that. I don't believe in just remembering bad times to remember them, but remember them so you know that when things are good, you should behave in a way that if things take a turn for the worse, or if you deal with financial strain, or if something, anything happens, that you're prepared and you're in a good position to make it through that. Because things will, when things will not always stay as good as they are. Things will not always keep improving. There's going to be dips, but the thing is that if you have a dip, if it ends up being this just as bad as the last one that you had, then your life's not really going anywhere, right? Because if life is improving, going up like this, and like you have, if you're like life is, if life is here, and you have, and this is kind of like you coming out of a dip, then life should improve enough that the next dip kind of happens up here. It shouldn't happen all the way down here again. But if you find yourself being in the same situation over and over again, then you're not really improving. Your life's not really headed in a general upward trajectory because that's what you want. Um, and I think that the way to prevent that, or the way to make sure that you're headed in the right direction and that life is generally improving, is to remember the bad times when you're in the good times. When you're comfortable, when you're warm, when there's enough money in the bank, when there's no debt, when life is good and everyone's happy and healthy, that's when you also have to just be aware of the bad times. Because you have to think what happened during those bad times. If it was something financial, like my situation, or if it was, if there's like, if it's common to have issues in a relationship or whatever it is, um, because then you understand how to operate. You understand like that things are good right now and life is improving and life will hopefully continue to improve, but I can't get comfortable and just expect that things are going to keep going this way without me putting any additional work in, or without me trying hard, or without me really being aware of what it takes to keep improving life in the at the rate and at the pace that it's been improving. Because I think that what happens is most of the time life gets better and you feel better, and then you get comfortable and you stop doing the things that made life better. You stop doing the things that took you from the dip, that took you from the valley up to the peak. And as soon as you do that, the fact of the matter is when you realize that that's what's going on, it's actually too late. And if you course correct quickly, you can fix it. But once you realize that you've gotten comfortable, that you've let yourself, given yourself some space or some leeway to relax in certain things, that's when you're actually already on the downswing already for the next dip. And it's very hard to stop because life will be good enough that you don't want to change it. You don't feel the need to change. But the thing is that the good enough is probably the most numbing detrimental thing that you can feel, because because before you realize it, you'll be in a position that you don't want to be in, and then you'll think, how did I get here? So I think it's important to understand that the bad times are not just suffering, it's also data. It's also reference experience. It's also something that is there to teach you outside of the suffering. It's also there to be something you can look back on and be like, okay, this is how I felt. This is what happens when I get comfortable during the good times. This is what happens when I don't save my money. This is what happens when I run up my debt. This is what happens when I take on expenses that I shouldn't take on, or when I get impulsive and I buy things I don't need, or if I impulsively commit to plans that I don't want to actually follow through on because I'm afraid to say no to people. Whatever it is, any number of things. Just think about things that happen when that are more likely to happen when everything is good, that that lead to a worse situation later. And when you're in kind of the thick of it, when you're in the bad situation, or the dip or the valley or whatever it is, I think it's important to write down what you're feeling, write down the stress that you feel. And it could be even small things, like financially, if you're feeling stress in terms of, I don't, if you don't know how you're going to pay rent, or if you feel pain every time you have to go out and spend money, and you have to write that down and write specifics of it, write specific instances. I don't feel good right now. Today is this date at this time. I went to this place and I felt I'm feeling stressed because of X, or, I'm stressed because of Y, or I'm feeling this because of that. The situation that I'm in right now is making me feel like this. And I think it's important, and it's a good idea to have a journal like that. You can call it the bad times journal or something, anything. And when things are good, you should read that journal. You should really look at it and just put yourself back in that place. Not to suffer again, but to remember, hey, things were like this before. And I don't want I don't want life to get like this again. And you can make notes in the journal too, right? Like you could put notes in there of how you're feeling in that moment and how you could prevent it in the future, right? So if it's financial strain, you could say, okay, I should not have been so relaxed about my spending when I did have money, or when I had more money. I should have saved more of my money. I should have invested more of my money. And then when things are good from a financial perspective, you could look at that notebook or that journal and say, okay, I told myself that I would be investing my money better, or I would be saving my money, so I'm going to do that. Or I wish I hadn't spent so much money. So it's like, okay, that acts as this reframe and kind of this point of confidence for yourself, where you have literally the playbook on how to prevent yourself from being in that situation again. Or if it's, and this doesn't have to be like a whole big life thing. It could be, there's good and bad times simultaneously. Like you could be having a good financial year, but you could have a terrible year health wise. So, or a terrible week or a terrible month or whatever, or just like a season. But if you've had times where you were working out and you were eating right and your nutrition was good and your training was good, and then you had times where you had let yourself go for weeks at a time and you were feeling a lot of regret and pain and trying to get back to the gym and realizing how hard it was, you could think back to when you kind of took your foot off the gas, right? What was it that caused you to take your foot off the gas and to not give up and kind of slip? And it's like, how did you end up in this situation? And when you're, I guess, like from a fitness perspective, if you find yourself struggling a lot to have the discipline to not eat junk food, or you have a hard time thinking about getting up and going to the gym, then those could be the bad times that you put in the journal. You could say like, I'm having a really hard time motivating myself because I've missed so many days, because I have so much sunk cost, because I've missed so many weeks. And in terms of like fixing it during the good times, you could tell yourself like, don't make any excuses to miss the gym. Like, don't even miss one day. Even if, you could put, okay, if you don't work out, but at least go to the gym and walk on the treadmill or run or hit or something, do something, because if you miss one day, then it's easier to miss the next day. And that's how I ended up in this situation again. So when things are going good, you tell yourself, you have a note to yourself that says, don't even miss a day. Don't let anything else take priority over this. Don't make any exceptions. Because as soon as you make one exception, you make 10 exceptions, and then, months go by and you're in the same spot. And these are like notes you write to yourself. These are notes that I've written to myself. So, um, anyway, I guess what it comes back down to is when things are good, remember the bad times. Remember the pain, remember the struggle, remember the crap that you had to go through to earn the good times. Because the thing is that in life, if you keep having good times, obviously you're gonna have good times and bad times. But life should generally trend in an upward direction, so that the bad times aren't nearly as bad. Because if you keep going through situations where things get good and then things get just as bad as they were before, and you never seem to quite get out of that, then you're basically just in this loop. And that cycle, you would think that, well, I keep ending up in the same situation, but the truth of the matter is, um, even if it feels the same, in the long run, it's actually going to start wearing you down a lot worse. So you want life to improve so that you have different problems, you have better problems, right? That's the kind of thing that I think that's a good way to look at it. Um, like at one point in time, I think financial stuff is the easiest to look at, but if you've ever been in a situation where you weren't sure if you were going to make rent, that could be a really rough time. Or if you had to move back in with friends or family or something like that, that could have been a very rough time, right? And then once you're out of it, either you get a better job or whatever it is. Once you're out of that situation, you want to um, make sure you're never in that situation again. And so you have to make better decisions along those lines. But if you go from, if the worst financial situation was that one time, you had a couple months where you were struggling to make rent, and then when things are going good, you should manage your money in a way that you don't ever find yourself in that situation again. And then like in the future, if something bad happens or you kind of find yourself in another financial strain, maybe next time around, it's not so much that you're having trouble paying rent, but maybe it's that you ran your credit cards up a little bit more, and so that means you have to tighten your spending elsewhere so you could pay them off. That's a better situation to be in, right? That's a better problem to have than worrying about rent. This is what I mean, if that makes sense. So it's like the first horrible financial situation was worrying about rent. The next one is, well, I spent a little bit too much on my cards, and so I don't know if I'm gonna, I don't know if I'm gonna miss a payment or be late or whatever it is. That's a better situation than worrying if you're going to be able to pay rent and have a place to live. And it's like, as life continues to go up, maybe you'll have a different like maybe the financial problems will be different. You want them to keep being different types of problems because you can't escape problems. So you want better and better problems. Because if you are constantly in a situation where it's the same situation as the first one, the same context where you had a situation where you didn't know if you were going to be able to make rent, and then as life gets better and things improve, and let's say you get to a point where you move to a new place and you rent a new place that's much more expensive, and then if a bad situation comes again and you're struggling with the same issue of, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make rent because my rent is so expensive, then um, then you're having the same types of problems. And you could say, well, that's a better problem, but it's like, yeah, maybe it's a better problem because you have a bigger place, or a nicer place, but you're still struggling with essentially the same situation where you don't know if you're going to have a place to live if you don't make the rent because you decided to upgrade or you decided to spend so much more on your living situation. And so you don't want that. You don't want to have the same kind of problem. You want to have different kinds of problems. You want to kind of upgrade your problems, because if you're constantly in the situation where you are worried about your rent or your mortgage, no matter what happens in your life, even if life improves, you still level up, or you still increase all your costs or whatever it is, so that you have the same kinds of issues, then you might think, well, uh, you know, having the same kinds of problems in life isn't really improving. But the thing is that life doesn't really stay stagnant, right? Like life doesn't stay on an even level. It's either improving or it's getting worse. Um, and so if you find yourself with the same problems constantly, then you're not actually dealing with the same problems. You're dealing with worse problems. You just haven't realized it yet. Um, I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if I explained that well, but I think at the core of it, the the essence that I've understood about life is that life doesn't ever really stay the same. Life is either improving or it's getting worse, right? Like you're either life is either going up or going down, and it might be going up or down at a very slow rate, but it never just stays the same. So you want life to move in an upward trajectory. You want the good times to keep being, you want the good times to be like higher highs, and you want the bad times to be higher lows. Because if not, you aren't really going anywhere. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy or drastic, but as long as the general trend is up, then I think overall you can have a good life and you can be comfortable or you can be happy with where things are. And you can have problems that don't wipe you out every single time they come, or anytime there's a rough period or a rough patch. It doesn't feel like the whole world's going to end or that the ground's going to give out beneath you. Um, so I think that one of the things that I've developed or forced myself to do is to remember the bad times when things are good, especially when things are good, and literally writing down the experience of the bad times when you're in it. Say, I'm feeling X because of Y right now, and I wish I had done Z when things were better, or something like that. And that in and of itself can be something you look back on. It's something that I look back on when things are good, and I remember, okay, like let me remember this and adjust my behavior now accordingly, so that if things don't turn out the way I want, or if I go through a rough patch or whatever, I'll at least have done things right now that will make my life easier if I end up in the situation again. Because the bad times aren't really, it's not about suffering. You've already suffered through it once, but use the data that's there to influence the decisions that you make now. And essentially, I guess what it boils down to is when you're going through the rough times or the bad times, you actually usually form better habits that get you to the good times. And then when you get to the good times, a lot of people tend to abandon those habits, which is human nature. Um, but you have to keep the habits that you make during the bad times. And if you do that long enough, then I think you improve your life enough that you don't ever have to deal with the same problems again. Excuse me. So remember the bad times when you're going through them. Appreciate them, because it'll teach you how good things can be and how good things can get. And it's also giving you a lot of lessons. You really learn lessons more in pain than in pleasure. So when you're going through the bad times, learn to appreciate them. Learn to use the data that you've been given. And when you're going through the good times, remember the bad times, so that you can operate in a way that you don't have to go through them again. Or you go through them in a way where they're not as bad and don't have as negative of an impact on your life. So I hope that makes sense. That's something that I've used and I hope to continue to use to improve my life. And I hope it's something that helps you out as well.